Hello.
The nice thing about that's hot. So Turner, your mic will be on, and Turner will have to use it. And then he'll
You good? Awesome.
please come and take your seats. Welcome. Come on down. Well, hello, everyone. My name's Wendy Newman. I am Rector's Warden here at the Cathedral, and I have the honor of welcoming you all on behalf of the Dean, the Very Reverend Tim Dobbin, and the Corporation and people of Christchurch Cathedral. A warm welcome to all of you who are here in person, and an especially warm welcome as well to those of you who are joining us through the live stream. So we are here for what's called Cathedral Chat. What is Cathedral Chat? It's simply a series of conversations that we host with thought leaders in our city around important issues. Now, for us at the Cathedral, who are deeply embedded in this city and in this Jamesville neighborhood, we have a strong belief that facilitating conversation about the key challenges of our time and place are an essential part of our calling here. We are called to love and take care of one another and to seek and advance justice, social justice and environmental justice. And this evening, we are focusing on the critically important subject of affordable housing. I will just add, by way of the next item in the series, that on April 17th, we are going to be hosting a conversation about the phenomenon that has come to be known as Christian nationalism. On behalf of all of us here, I would like to thank the Cathedral's Community Engagement Committee for organizing this Cathedral Chat, and particularly our chair, Carrie Lubrick, who is here. Please wave, Carrie Lubrick, so we can acknowledge you. Thank you so much. I want to mention, just before we get underway, 3 very short items. First of all, where are the washrooms? You just go down and turn right at the end of the aisle there, and you can be directed to the washrooms nearby. Second, I want to draw your attention to 2 tables at the back. One, Raising the Roof is selling toques to support homelessness prevention initiatives. Our bottle here is showing how you can make a highly positive fashion statement. So please support this initiative. Also, Dr. Sally Palmer's petition to raise social assistance rates, just such a critically important part of the issue that we are talking about. And finally, there will be coffee and cookies and hot chocolate to enjoy at the conclusion of the evening. So we hope that you will be able to stay for that when we wrap our discussion at 8:30. And now I have the honor of introducing our panelists. We are very grateful indeed to have 3 panelists whose knowledge and experience and commitment are lights in our city. And I'll just invite them to come up and sit down as I introduce them. First, Jeff Nevin, who is Chief Executive Officer of Indwell. Jeff is an esteemed community leader who actively engages in various local initiatives like neighborhood engagement active transportation, homelessness prevention, his local church, and promoting recreational and employment opportunities for remote Indigenous youth. He earned a Master of Social Work degree in Community, Policy, Planning, and Organizations from Wilfrid Laurier University. Welcome, Jeff Nevin. Second, Tom Cooper, who is Director of the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction. For the past 9 years, through the Roundtable's work, Tom has engaged governments at all levels to invest in poverty reduction initiatives, and he has worked to give people experiencing poverty a voice in the decisions that affect their lives. He's advocated for social assistance rates that reflect the real cost of living, fought to end predatory lending in Ontario, and also helped co-found the Ontario Living Wage Network, an initiative of 30 Ontario communities endeavoring to address working poverty. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
And thirdly, finally, Michelle Baird, who is Director of Housing Services for the City of Hamilton. Michelle has been with Housing Services for just over a year, but she has been with the City of Hamilton for almost 25 years, of which over 20 were with Public Health Services. And through Michelle's work in public health, she transitioned to housing in order to work more closely with vulnerable individuals, as she is passionate about the social determinants of health, equity, and the health of a community. And our facilitator and interviewer today, the Reverend Monica Romig Green, who is Assistant Curate here at Christ Church Cathedral. Your panel and moderator.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you, Wendy. And thanks again, all of you, for being here, and especially to our esteemed panelists here. The idea behind Cathedral Chat is really to be a chat. It's an opportunity for us to just talk, hence the water and the flowers. It's meant to not be a formal kind of thing. We really want to hear a little bit about who you are. But let's start just with the question now. We've already had the introduction a bit about your formal selves. Could you tell us a little bit more about your organizations and what your organization is doing in the area of affordable housing? Okay? Who would like to start?
You're all looking at me.
Yeah.
So first of all, good evening. My name is Jeff Nevin, and just delighted to be here. And thank you so much for hosting these conversations. It's really, really important that we as a community gather and discuss important topics like housing and homelessness. Hamilton is home for me, born and raised out in Dundas, and went away for school and came back, and I was raised in a construction family. So in our housing's kind of in our blood. It's now a fourth generation family business, and but I went and became a social worker, which doesn't quite work with the family construction business. And I thought of myself always as a black sheep, but here we are back bringing those things together, which I think is important, is each of us bring what we know and have. And so I've been now with Indwell for, first as a volunteer and as staff since 2001. And it's an important, I don't know if you want me to talk about Indwell yet?
Yeah, talk about Indwell.
So this is a big year for us. Indwell was started 50 years ago right here in Hamilton. And it was started out of a response, I imagine, quite like this. It was faith people coming together and having a conversation about where are we seeing the challenges in our community. And at that time, it was folks coming out of psychiatric hospital who had been institutionalized for much of their lives and had few skills, life skills, and I would suggest perhaps even more importantly, few people to help them. Few networks, very few networks, and people who would have your back and help you to navigate the complexities of life. And so Indwell started. first in someone's home, then in a rented house, and then we bought a place. Some of you are familiar with it, on Locke Street, right across from Melrose United Church, where it was there for about 25 years or so. And so today, we continue in that same work of coming together as a response of the community. We're a charity that exists to carry out the interests of the community in responding to those who are seeking particularly affordable housing and support. And we still continue to help people with transitions still today, from hospital to community, and from street into housing, and maybe from poor housing to better housing, but we often get to come alongside folks in transition and dream with them about a preferred future and set goals. And we've grown quite a bit. We currently have over 1,200 people that live with us, not all in Hamilton. We've taken this idea and we've spread it around, and so we're now from Mississauga to London, St. Thomas, Kitchener, Woodstock, and such.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you. Tom, Michelle.
Sure. Yeah, I'll go next. Thanks, Monica. And hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and certainly appreciate the welcome. Like Jeff, I am a lifelong Hamiltonian. Grew up on Sandford Avenue in central Hamilton. I attended Stinson School and Adelaide Hoodless and Scott Park, and two of those three are no longer known by those same names. I was actually kidding around with the Reverend Debbie McMillan, who is United Church minister up at St. Andrew's Church on the West Mountain, because she and I were in the same grade 3 class at Stinson School many years ago, way back in the last century. And you may be aware that Stinson has certainly been renovated. It is now high-end condos, and so we were talking about the fact that our grade 3 class is now selling for about $890,000 for a one-bedroom plus den.
Wow.
Yeah, but certainly Hamilton has changed a lot over the last number of years, and my organization, the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction, has not really been at the forefront of affordable housing or homelessness, but really our niche was looking at income security in our community. And the Roundtable is made up of community leaders as well as individuals with the lived experience of poverty. And our task was really set about 15 years ago to try to identify some big policy issues that we really think needed addressed. One of those was around inadequacy of social assistance rates in this province. I'm going to talk about that a little later, because I think there is very much a correlation between income security and homelessness in our community, and the fact that governments simply haven't done enough to address the woefully inadequate rates of social assistance. And Sally Palmer's here and has petitions, so I would certainly encourage you to stop by our table and sign them, but we'll talk a little bit more in depth about what some of those challenges are. But in terms of the Roundtable, we've been pushing for income security, but a couple of years ago we also recognized that there was really a growing crisis of homelessness in our community. And so at the behest of a number of community members, we got involved in the idea to create a small community of tiny cabins to really try to stabilize individuals, keep them healthy, keep them safe until more affordable, permanent forms of housing became available. And so that initiative became the Hamilton Alliance for Tiny Shelters, and I'll be pleased to talk a little bit about that idea as we progress today as well. Thanks,
so
Monica.
much, Tom. Thanks. Michelle.
Thank you. I'm Michelle Baird. I'm the Director of Housing Services with the City of Hamilton. As you heard, I've been with Housing Services now just over a year, about a year and a half. Although I would say that I started with the cities quite some time ago in many roles within public health. And I would suggest to you that in lots of ways, I still work in public health from the perspective that the issue of housing, the impacts on individuals that are precariously housed individuals that are experiencing homelessness truly is a public health issue in the community. And so how I got to this particular position through my work in public health, worked in lots of different roles, and then as we come up to 2020, I was in a role doing infection control and leading the outbreak response work in the community, and as you know, we come into a pandemic. Through that COVID response, it became quite evident to all of us in public health, but I was quite, I guess, touched to see the inequity with respect to who was impacted by the pandemic. And people that were precariously housed, individuals that found themselves in shelters, in close gathering settings, that kind of things, far more impacted than many that were more fortunate. And so as we come out of the pandemic, an opportunity arose to move to housing services, and that's where I am today. Very fortunate to be in housing. I think it's a unique place to work in the city. We work closely with the community, and different than maybe others here, we don't necessarily build affordable housing. However, we're in a place that we support and facilitate affordable housing being built. You'll know that the city declared a crisis with respect to homelessness and housing, and it is a priority area of focus for the city, so we look for ways not only to build new affordable housing and support that happening, but also find ways to retain the housing stock that we have, as well as ensure that people can maintain their housing. So when we think about things like social assistance rates and not keeping pace with the cost of living, we have support programs in place to support individuals so they can stay in their current unit so that we don't find more people falling into a place of homelessness.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I can tell already that the three of you are very passionate about your work, that it also sounds like it's very fulfilling, but that's a great segue into one of my questions here. So what is going on in Hamilton today regarding affordable housing? Meaning, like, what is being offered, what's being built? Are there collaborations going on in this work? And what are some of the challenges?
Maybe I could start with some of the challenges.
Yeah.
Because I think putting it in context would be helpful. And this story goes back at least 30 years, because in the 1990s, there was some policy decisions made that are having the impact we're seeing today in terms of the growing number of individuals and souls in our community who are without a home. Back in the 1990s, the federal government was very, very concerned about deficit reduction and cutting costs. And so they downloaded affordable housing, really, that had been a hallmark of federal government initiatives prior to that point, down to the provinces. The provinces likewise had made some similar cost-cutting measures and often downloaded those responsibilities around housing and supportive housing to municipalities, which didn't have the ability to cover those extraordinary costs. And so today we're faced with the reality of those policy decisions coming home to roost, that we haven't made the investments in affordable housing that we've needed. In addition to that, there's been some other policy decisions made at the provincial level that really looks at landlord-tenant legislation that has made it very, very difficult in some cases for low-income tenants to maintain affordable housing. And coupled with that is the fact that we've seen a growing commodification of housing. And I use the example of my old school, Stinson School, being converted into condominiums, high-end condominiums. But certainly we've seen a raft of individual private investors and big property management companies buying up affordable housing units. And because of the way the Residential Tenancies Act was created, those property management companies, those landlords, can really charge whatever they think they can get on the market when a tenant leaves those accommodations. And so we've seen skyrocketing rents in our community. And really the inability of a significant portion of our population to pay for it. And I talked about social assistance rates as well, because this plays into it too. And social assistance rates have remained woefully inadequate for way too long. particularly Ontario Works, but the Ontario Disability Support Program too. Ontario Works today sits at $733 a month. And probably most of you will know the average cost of even a modest one-bedroom or a bachelor apartment is often $1,000 more than that. And so there's no feasible way low-income people on fixed incomes, on social assistance, can afford those units. And so combined with the devolution of housing from the federal government and provincial government, really some very difficult residential and landlord-tenant laws that are in place in this province, and the failure of governments to improve social assistance has really led to the situation we're in now.
Thanks for that context. What other challenges do either of you also, would you add to that?
So I would just start by saying this is personal. I think it's personal to every one of us in the room. I live in Ward 3. By my estimation, there's at least 150 people sleeping outside tonight in Ward 3. These are my neighbors. So it's personal. I have to be careful how much I want to share, but even just while I was sitting here, I'm looking at my phone, trying to coach a friend of mine who's homeless into how to properly word his phrases to respond to someone. He's trying to rent a room, and he can't find a room in a shared house. And I'm coaching him on wording to use and to avoid. And for a room, anybody have an idea how much it costs to rent a room? He's looking at like basements that have been divided into 5 rooms. They share a bathroom, no kitchen. This is what we're talking about. We're not talking about, any idea how much that costs? 900, yeah. $800 to $900 is what he's looking at. So chances are there's many of us in the room who've gone through that experience ourselves or with a loved one or a friend. That's why you're here tonight, because it's personal. And simply there's just not enough housing. We can go back and look at the approaches to that, but I would be with Tom in suggesting, you know, the policy that we have developed over the last 30, 40 years has delivered exactly what it was designed for. And there was a dramatic shift 30 years ago in a belief that the market would always provide for what was needed, that there would be a demand and that the market would provide. But we've artificially stymied that by not helping people to have adequate income to be able to purchase from the market that what they need. And so we see, as well as there's labor shortages and the construction industry is tightening up and costs are going up. I sat down with some developers last week, and I too am trying to understand, because I only see the issue from who we serve, and Indwell primarily houses and serves folks who are, we target our housing for people whose household income is under $15,000 a year. And so I started asking, what's the minimum entry point? And these were some larger developers. What's the minimum entry point of household income for people who are buying your new housing of all types? And they didn't really want to answer. I said, is it $120,000? And they said, a little higher. So I know it's at least $120,000 or higher, and we know that. You start running, ask any realtor what you need to make to cover, you talked about that condo in your, kind of tongue-in-cheek, your grade 3 classroom of being almost $900,000. Well, just run the numbers, what your household income needs to be to have a $900,000 mortgage. So hopefully you have somebody, some maybe intergenerational or generational wealth that's passed on or something like that. But for those who don't, and I'd suggest no matter what the crisis is, if you think about a natural disaster, it's usually those with the least who pay the most. And that's what we're seeing today. We have a housing crisis. There is a shortage of housing, and those who have the least resources, the least networking, the least abilities to respond to that crisis are paying, they're literally paying with having to sleep outside in my neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that, Jeff. Thank you for reminding us that it's a multi-layered thing. It hits us in policy, it hits us in strategy, it hits the market, but it also hits the heart, right? It hits the heart. Thank you. Yeah, well, what is happening out there? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we doing?
So Jeff is a hard act to follow.
Yeah.
Despite all of that, I think that there are some opportunities and there are good things happening, and they're very, very well-intentioned groups, individuals, what have you, in the city. I think there's lots of collaboration. There's lots of opportunity to build affordable housing. The challenges we have in many cases are financial, that the municipality is trying to step up where possible. When we came through the budget year this year, for example, at this point in time, the municipality, so the City of Hamilton, is actually paying more money toward affordable housing, toward the homelessness issue overall, than either other level of government. And it's simply not affordable on the local municipal tax base. And so we're challenged because without the other levels of government, be it provincial government, federal government stepping up, we are in a place where we're stuck. So when we think about things like affordability, to build a unit right now, it's hard to do that for less than $500,000 a unit, basically. And so when you see the municipality is bringing $10 million to the table, that sounds like a large number. And for taxpayers, they see it, it's of course a big number, but it's nowhere near what's needed to actually address the issue that's in front of us. So I think the financial piece is significant.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree in any way that for folks that are on social assistance, OW, ODSP, it's almost insurmountable at this point in time. And there's lots of folks, I think, stepping up, this community in particular, this church in particular, providing great supports for people experiencing homelessness. But those are Band-Aid solutions. They're solutions for in the moment so that perhaps we don't have people on the street night after night, but it's just that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's one of the things that our community engagement committee is adamant about, is that yes, we do what we can in the moment, like Cathedral Cafe here, but we also need more. We need to advocate for these larger structural changes so that we don't have to, host so many people, give them a place to go during the middle of the day and at night.
If I can just build on what Michelle was saying, Hamilton has done significant work and effort in addressing the housing situation. In Indwell, we work in, like I mentioned, we're in many different municipalities, and Hamilton's always been at the table. I think one of the strengths that we have here in Hamilton that a lot of other communities wish they had is we have a really strong network of nonprofits and charities in the space of housing. Indwell's part of a coalition called the Hamilton is Home, which is laid out a plan of how we can end homelessness together. So there is good news. The good news is we actually know how to solve this. The challenge, while I talked about the folks living outside, it's actually a finite challenge. We actually know everyone's name. Most people have had assessments, needs assessments done. We know what kind of housing they need. So it's actually a finite challenge. And when we're talking about, right, I think the last numbers I read on the Hamilton Spectator mentioned 350 folks sleeping outside. So let's just run with that number. 350 units of housing is actually, we can wrap our heads around that. We can get a sense of that. Now, housing's expensive, and we're in a current climate where the provincial and federal governments are backing off. There was no new federal dollars in this current fiscal year of new affordable housing dollars coming. into, the National Housing Strategy didn't get additional boosts this year. So like for organizations like ours and others on the Hamilton is Home, we all have projects that are sitting there construction ready, waiting to be green lighted. So we have this robust organizations, we have the solutions. The HATS program is a wonderful idea that will get us between here and when these buildings can potentially open. But we can open hundreds of units of supportive housing if we have the collective will to do so. And it's about 18 months from the time that we put a shovel in the ground till we're welcoming people into their home. So yeah, a solution like HATS is a fantastic solution to get us from here to there. It's cost effective, and so that's the good news. The good news is we do have the solutions, we do have the ideas, but we don't have the provincial or federal support coming alongside. I'll give you a very concrete example. Our Acorn Flats project, which is at East and Robert, 23 units of supportive housing for families, 2 and 3 bedroom units, and the City of Hamilton has allocated funds towards that project, but there's a funding gap, and we need the province or the feds to step in to fill that funding gap. And this is, so it's not a matter of that we don't know the solution, that we don't have the opportunity ahead of us. It's that collectively as Canadians, we are not prioritizing this, and our politicians are reflecting that in our budgets. And so I put the blame back on us, ironically still, that we need to be the ones reminding our politicians that who we care about. What the community looks like that we want to live in. Yeah, so I think there is some hope in that and some challenge.
Thank you. Yeah.
I agree completely with Jeff, and I think it does take political will and it takes community will. And we've seen that in our history. We saw following World War II when returning veterans were coming back to Canada and there wasn't enough housing, there was a concerted effort to build those wartime homes and make sure there was enough space for everybody. We need a commitment like that. We need a commitment like we saw during the pandemic when 7-8 million Canadians were left without incomes because their places of work shut down, and the Canadian government came up with the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit. And say what you will about that program and how it's been handled over the last couple of years, but at the time, it was pretty bold, and it was innovative, and it was something that Canadians got behind. And I completely agree. We need that type of bold thinking once again when it comes to ensuring that Canadians can have the right to housing. And just to touch on HATS, on the Hamilton Alliance for Tiny Shelters, it also takes community will as well. And certainly the Anglican Diocese has been incredibly supportive, and for almost a year, we had a model tiny cabin right out front here that was an example of what it could look like. But when we were offered a potential space for those tiny cabins, for a tiny cabin village for a short period of time, for 18 months, there was a significant amount of pushback. And so we're still looking for that right spot. And maybe it wasn't necessarily the best spot for us, but I think if we come together as a community, we can locate a tiny village of cabins to be able to meet the needs and bring those wraparound services in and help individuals who are facing homelessness, some of them for the first time. There's lots of people out there who have been evicted because they simply can't afford rent, and they're on the street and they're terrified and they're afraid to go to a shelter because they don't know what to expect, or maybe they're concerned about their safety. And don't get me wrong, there are amazing shelters out there and fantastic staff working at them, but they're not for everybody. There's lots of people out there who are in couples and would have to separate if they went to a shelter. And so the Hamilton Alliance for Tiny Shelters could provide for individuals and couples as well, or even people who are homeless who have a beloved pet and need some place to stay with their pet because they don't want to give them up. And there's examples of this where people, have a beloved cat and they want to stay with that cat, even if it means sleeping in an encampment or sleeping rough. So I think there's some awesome ideas out there, but we need to stabilize people. We need to keep them safe until inspirational programs like Hamilton is Home can get off the ground. And I would like to mention as well the fantastic work that St. Matthew's House is doing too, in terms of being able to house individuals in our community from diverse backgrounds who are facing homelessness as well, or a danger of not having adequate housing. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. You leaned right into the next kind of question that I had there. How is diversity being considered in affordable housing and the housing system?
I can jump in. We've learned some things from the point-in-time counts. One of the things we've learned is there's certain populations that are significantly overrepresented. One of those communities is the Indigenous community. And it depends who's asking and why they're asking and when, but in our community, it's somewhere between 25 and 30% of our homeless population are Indigenous. And again, depending who's asking and when, of our general population, it's about 2 to 4% of our overall Hamiltonians are identified as Indigenous. So there's and we know a lot of the story, right? We know about, we know some of that story, I should say, about residential schools and the impact that's had and generational impact. And so one of the things that we have been focusing on as an organization is being very intentional about changing that story. And again, Hamilton is so rich with incredible organizations that are Indigenous-led organizations. I don't know if we realize how rich we are here with that capacity. And so we've, I'll just give you a couple examples. We've partnered with Sacagawea, a nonprofit housing organization. And we just started by a building saying, we're going to house a minimum of 20% of the folks here we're going to house will be Indigenous. But as we worked with our partners, it ended up being 30% of those who are housed. And then we said, okay, the next two projects, as we got to know each other, the next two relatively small projects, but we said 100% for Indigenous communities so that we can make sure that there's culturally relevant supports and such. And then, challenges breeds innovation. And we have, organization-wide, we had 14 projects that are in the development stage, construction ready, that we can't figure out how to get funded. And one of those, we were able to transfer ownership to Sacagawea just last month. And so our challenge, they came and rescued us, and as well, it's a pretty neat land back story as well. So we went from a percentage of folks being Indigenous to these buildings are tenanted only by Indigenous, but we still own them. And now this project is owned, and we're supporting Sacagawea because our development team does project development. We'll continue to work with them on that. So that would be one diverse community that we have a challenge of overrepresentation, and there's some really unique responses to that.
Thanks. Michelle, what were you going to say?
So I think from a couple perspectives outside of the Indigenous population, I would say this group might be surprised to hear that one of the particular challenges we have in Hamilton is around family homelessness, and Acorn Flat's certainly a possible solution to that problem. But right now we have upwards of 80 families in Hamilton that are homeless. They're staying in shelters, they're staying in a hotel, what have you. And for those families, often we might think it's often mums and children. Sometimes it's a grandmother, a mom, and the children. And they're quite fearful coming to shelters. They're quite fearful that they're going to lose their children through this experience. The other piece, of course, is the impact on children growing up in a shelter. And so what does that generational impact look like? So really trying to find ways to not only invest in affordable housing that can house individuals, but looking at family solutions as well. The other piece I would say that's been a need, and I'll keep speaking on the women's side of things, is we have an excellent project, an example of a project in Hamilton, the Dorothy Day Center that's open now. The city is supporting the operations of that facility. And it took 73 women direct from homelessness, many of whom were sleeping rough, living in encampments, and provided them with housing and 24/7 wraparound supports and housed those individuals. Some of these women had not been housed for many, many years. Some of them grew up and lived through lots of trauma that really resulted in them being homeless. A success story from that particular services that we have there right now is that the majority of the women that were housed there remain there almost a year later, which is excellent. And since the center opened, they haven't had one overdose on site. So the importance of those wraparound supports, providing a supportive environment and housing people in a place that they know they have a permanent home is really key to success. So I think those are some examples where really trying to focus on the needs of women, non-binary individuals, gender diverse individuals, and so looking for opportunities to have that happen. And really when we're supporting affordable housing development, thinking of the individuals who really need housing and the individuals for whom perhaps traditional housing is just not going to meet the needs.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Did you want to add anything to this topic?
I would just add in the particular challenge of a growing number of refugees coming into Hamilton. And I would certainly argue, and I think most people here would argue, that we have a solemn responsibility to provide a safe refuge for those fleeing war-torn situations around the world. Unfortunately, the funding hasn't always followed when we've needed to house individuals and families, oftentimes large families, who are coming into our community for safety. And so again, I'll point back at the federal government and say we definitely need more resources to ensure that not only those individuals who we've offered a safe refuge to have a place to stay, but certainly also others who are also already in the community looking for spaces as well.
Thank you. Thank you all. You give such a broad picture of the kinds of challenges that are diversity in this population that are in need of this affordable housing.
Can I just respond real quick to what
Sure.
Tom said? Because Allison is here, and sorry I'm outing you here, Allison, but Allison runs an organization that's super grassroots, so Hamilton. It's called Open Homes, and you've just placed your 100th refugee with families. And so they're connecting people with empty bedrooms and folks who are coming into Canada, unsponsored refugees coming into Canada who need a place to stay. And it's just how Indwell started, connecting empty bedrooms with people who needed it. And so just wave Allison, people can talk to you afterwards, because it's again, the richness that we have here in Hamilton, we can continue to build on this. Yeah. And we have people that just quietly go and say, I know people with empty bedrooms, I know people who need them, I'm just gonna connect them, and just kind of do it. That's the richness that we have here in Hamilton, and as you can tell, we're big fans of Hamilton and the solutions that we're creating here too.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that ad, and thank you for the work you're doing. So, what can all of us here and online, what can we all be doing to help? What actions can we take Because clearly this is a group of people who care about this topic. How can we help?
I'm going to jump on that because I think, you know, you talked about income, and income has to be part of this conversation. So we need to increase the OW and ODSP rates. But right now, there's a piece of legislation around the Canadian disability benefit that's at the federal level. And it's not catching much attention. And I think we can help it catch attention, because I think it is perhaps one of the biggest changes that to impact homelessness, particularly for people living with disabilities. Can you imagine if someone, so this is like a federal program that would be similar to like an ODSP, but at the federal level. Could you imagine if someone with a disability had an extra, let's say, $2,000 or even $1,500 a month? All of a sudden it opens up so many more options. And the dignity that comes when you have the money to go purchase from the market or from a nonprofit what you need in terms of housing. So I think that's the biggest thing actually right now from a policy perspective would make the biggest impact on those particularly living with disabilities.
Do you know what it's called and how people can?
Yeah.
I'm looking at you.
Yeah. No, I love what I'm hearing, and absolutely, I think we need to encourage our federal members of parliament to get behind the idea of the Canadian disability benefit. I'm a little bit of the opinion that although I will speak until the end of the night about the inadequacy of Ontario Works Rates and the Ontario Disability Support Program, I really do think our current income security system in Ontario is antiquated and it's had its day. I'm a huge proponent of the idea of a basic income for everybody, and really the Canadian disability benefit goes part way to achieving that national basic income. And we tested it here in Hamilton between 2017 and 2018, and we found that people who were on basic income were able to stabilize their housing. They were eating healthier. They were buying warm clothes for winter. They were able to re-engage in the community. Not only did they keep the jobs they had, because a lot of them were working part-time jobs, trying to cobble together enough hours to make ends meet, but they were engaging in skills upgrading and going back to school and trying to get better jobs. So I really do think that basic income, and we can start off with the Canadian disability benefit to see how it works, but I really do think a national basic income is the way to go. I think it will be to the 21st century what Medicare was to the 20th century. I think it's that powerful, and we've seen examples of how it could work. So yeah, I would certainly agree with Jeff on that.
That's great, thank you. Michelle, what do you think? What do you recommend we can all do?
No, I don't disagree at all. I think advocacy with respect to provincial federal policy change, particularly around income, is probably the big lever and a place that you can all use your voice to support that. I think that I know lots is happening already, ground level response, which is wonderful. And I think the other piece that we have that continues to be challenging is when we are finding local solutions to listen to the different voices at the table, understand where people are coming from, because I think there are good solutions and we have to take the opportunity at times, support new ideas and try some different things.
That's really, really great.
If you can have the opportunity to contact your provincial representatives. You've heard it tonight. Hamilton is home. We have enough projects that are ready to go to end homelessness for those who are sleeping rough. So why don't we do that? That seems like a reasonable idea to me. I would also suggest there's some positives from the provincial kind of legislation side around increasing the ability for density in our communities. Yeah. So this is a really positive thing that's happened. And there are hundreds of Hamiltonians taking advantage of this, of building secondary dwellings. I think one of the things we can do is all of us go build a secondary dwelling. Go and do it to buildings and fire code standards, do it legally, build a basement apartment, and if you house your mother, your son, your cousin, or a neighbor, or the person who's sleeping in a car out in front of your house, we need to create more housing, and we need to do this, and we now have a way to do that. Could you imagine if we just went out and over the next couple of years, we as citizens just created another 100,000 units within our urban boundary in our own space? And the stuff that comes out of that I love, when you share a backyard with somebody, who knows, you might start sharing a barbecue and then start sharing barbecues together and getting to know each other and find out that newcomer needs a connection to a job, and all these spin-off things that are also possible from those kind of engagements. And so I think there's things that we can quite tangibly do. Some of us have homes, and that's who I'm talking to here when I say, so there's definitely things that we can do. Some of us have empty bedrooms, and you heard from me tonight that there's opportunity for that too.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else?
So that's the carrot approach. I think there needs to be a stick approach too. And I look at other provinces, particularly Quebec, which has much more progressive rent control legislation than we have here in Ontario. Back in the 1960s, 1970s, there was real rent control in this province. And as a result, it was much easier for people, if they ran into an emergency financial situation, to keep their home and not get evicted and not end up on the street. Because of the Residential Tenancies Act and the way it's structured today, though, economic evictions are happening at higher and higher frequencies, and more people than ever before are ending up in situations of dire homelessness. And we've seen the numbers. People are afraid to complain to landlords if they need repairs done to their units, if there's mold growing, if they feel unsafe, because they don't want to take the chance of losing that rental unit and then having to go into really a social Darwinism open market for housing and try to get what they can. The latest average rent, according to rental.ca, which is an online registry of apartments, was something in the range of around $1,800 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. And if you're on a fixed income, if you're on social assistance, if you're on old age security, it's not going to work. And so we really do need to, I think, take a step back, demand our provincial government get serious about real rent controls again.
Thank you. I love this carrot and stick.
I think the piece I'd add to that too, when we think about those affordable units, when people are unfortunately evicted or they leave the unit, two things happens in that situation. There's not necessarily an affordable place for that tenant to go, but when that unit comes back online, it's not coming back at the affordable rate, it's coming back at the $1,800 a month. So as a community, we lose access to affordable units as well. So it's the individuals impacted, but we're impacted as a whole because we lose that affordable stock.
Yeah. And if I could just add one more thing. A lot of people may not be aware, but it may be obvious, but it is far more cost effective to keep somebody in an affordable housing unit than to deal with homelessness once it has become a reality. Because when you add up the costs for somebody staying at a homeless shelter, I'm not sure what the latest numbers are, Michelle, but it's probably in the range of $2,200 a month, something like that. For somebody to stay at a shelter in an institutionalized setting on a mattress, and it's not the greatest of situations, but if you provide income supports to those same individuals and they are able to maintain their affordable housing, they will be in a much, much better spot.
Well, and that's to your point too about health, right? That it's a public health issue.
Yeah, and I think the other piece on that is not only is the cost of shelter, and emergency shelter is certainly more than keeping someone housed, the experience of going through homelessness and finding yourself in a shelter, that particular experience is something that people aren't easily going to come through and find themselves in a good landing spot, versus if we can find ways to just keep people housed where they are, whatever that looks like, it's better for the individual.
Yeah, yeah,
If I can just suggest a couple more things that we can do.
please.
Get to know your neighbors who are sleeping outside. Humanize the experience for all of us in the city. Bring some coffee. Show compassion. Have a conversation where you have the opportunity to affirm someone's dignity. It's a small thing, but affirming someone's dignity is the core foundational. And so I think there's ways that we can advance the conversation, talk to our neighbors. And many people who have homes or would like to own a home, there's lots of people struggling, even more than those who are sleeping in tents. And sometimes we hear some of that, right? There's not enough, so I need to point the finger at it's that person's problem. Don't fall into this scarcity bias. We live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and we have the opportunity to live out of abundance. There's more than enough, but it's not distributed in an equitable way. So we have to get our heads out of like, there's not enough and I need to grab mine while I can, and live instead out of a person, like we have to start personally out of a moral conviction of abundance. I'm not going to live my life out of scarcity and point my finger at someone else. I'm going to live intentionally out of abundance. And so I think, it makes sense that we're here in the cathedral talking about that, because I think that is a moral issue that we have to start with our own selves there as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. This is the end of our panel part. We're hitting the 1 hour mark, and we wanted to take an opportunity to hear from you. We're moving into the Q&A part of this. There is a microphone in the center of the aisle here. And I would ask, before we start asking our questions here, and by the way, if you're on the chat, if you're on the line, please put your question into the chat. Through the magic of texting, I will be able to see what your question is and ask it as well of our panels. But before we do this, I just want to say that, as is clear from the passion of our panelists here, this is an urgent and difficult and very emotional topic. And we will get to as many questions as we can. We're going to be really good about sticking to this half hour, because we like it when things start on time and we like it when things end on time. So that means maybe we won't get to all the questions that we might have in a half hour. But that's one of the reasons why our dear Roseanne is in the back with coffee and cookies, so that conversation can continue after the chat, after the Q&A session. And I would just like to ask everyone to be respectful in your questions and be mindful of the time. A half an hour is going to go by really quick with our Q&A. Okay, so if you've got a question, think how you can make it nice and short and ask it succinctly, okay? So if you have a question, feel free to go and just stand up. The microphone is right there, and feel free to pull it to your face so we can hear you. And everybody online can hear you too.
So can you hear me now?
We can, thank you.
Okay, great. I would like to ask the panel if they know about this real weakness in our social assistance system. I only found out about it recently. There's an organization that brings together municipalities across Ontario, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. And I've just recently seen a letter that he wrote to 2 relevant cabinet ministers about the fact that once a person becomes homeless, they actually stop getting the homeless part of the shelter part of their money. So that somebody getting $733 can lose, they said $300 to $400 a month. So they can't eat even. And I was shocked to know that. And I just wondered if other people did know about it.
Thank you. And watch your step as you walk around the... Thanks. Yes, who would like to address that?
You're absolutely correct. So the organization you're talking about, Hamilton, is an active participant within that group, the Ontario Municipal, the OMSA group that you're speaking about. And you are right that when a person finds themselves experiencing homelessness, the shelter component of their ODSP, OW payments, they no longer receive that full shelter amount any longer. So they find themselves in a place with less income supports than they had previously.
Wow.
Yep.
That's something to write to your politicians about, for sure. Another question. Thank you.
We've talked a lot about what we can do, but I do think that there is a responsibility above us where we have people who are buying hundreds of these housing units and jacking up the prices. And to me, it's unethical, and I think we need some legislation to actually stop that.
Yep.
So I'll jump in. You know, there's the carrot and the stick, and Tom's labeled me as the carrot guy, so I'll carry on. You know, I think we need to have a broad conversation about the percentage of units that we need that need to stay in the realm of public benefit. So, you know, what would it look like if we had 20% of all units that were owned by nonprofits, charities, that stayed in for public benefit? What would that look like? I think it would be transformational. And so I think we need to, the question I'm asking myself and our sector is, we need to figure out how to build a lot more units. And we need to figure out how to get support to do so. And we need to create housing that's going to stay for public benefit for the long-term permanent. That's how I'm not convinced that the private sector, it's designed, the private sector exists to make money. And if we take, I'm not sure that the stick will get us the results without having a counter opportunity that creates real housing solutions that stays in the public realm for public benefit over the long term. So I think we need to talk about that. We need to talk about not just how we create 50 units, 100 units, but how we create thousands of units that stay in the public realm every year.
Any other questions? Oh, we got two people going to the mic. It's okay.
Can someone give me the latest on the HATS project? What is going on? There was supposed to be something announced in January, I believe. And can we get around this issue of the city council actually making a decision, or is HATS a pointless thing that it will actually happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for those who may not have heard, it was just a question about the Hamilton Alliance for Tiny Shelters and an update on where we're at. We're continuing to engage both city council, city staff, and the community. We weren't successful in locating a community for this winter, unfortunately, due to a number of circumstances. And I talked about it earlier up at Strawn Linear Park. But City Council has gotten behind this idea, and they approved a 2-year pilot project. It's really just finding the right location. The community has been incredibly supportive. We've had many individual donors step up and offer assistance to get this project up and running. We've had everyone from students to Home Depot and other faith groups offering to help build the tiny cabins and get them up and running. And I see Ted Van Egdom here and Sue, who have been incredible supporters on the leadership team and have been doing incredible outreach in the community to try to get HATS up and running. But it's really for us finding the appropriate location and ensuring that it would be accessible and appropriate for the potential individuals who would be living there in the cabins, as well as for the community as a whole. And I think part of our work is really to look at how this could be a holistic response to homelessness. There's been lots of examples here in Ontario and across Canada that have demonstrated that this type of model can work. And it's actually more effective at getting people back into affordable and supportive housing than even shelters in some cases. So it's really, I think, just for us trying to find that location that would be appropriate, and we're hopeful that will be forthcoming over the next couple of months.
Great, thank you. Jim.
Go
ahead and tip the mic up to your mouth.
Okay.
There you go.
That okay now?
That's great.
In December 2023, the Ontario government, the provincial government passed the Better Schools and Student Outcomes Act. That will give itself the power to convert underutilized schools in Ontario into affordable housing or sell off the properties on the open market. Is there any hope or any help available through that process?
I got to see the policy yet. The current policy that I'm familiar with in the divestment of school properties, it does not prioritize organizations like ours. So we have to fight against condo developers once it goes to market to get those schools. There are, other school boards would be a priority. Municipal affordable housing is a priority. So there's a divestment list. I have not heard yet that has been changed, but I would advocate strongly that nonprofits and charities developing affordable housing should be on that priority list.
Here.
Great, next question.
While we're talking about school boards, Hamilton School Board is also reviewing its educational development charges this year. Do you know that in Dwell, when we build a one-bedroom or a studio apartment, we pay the same price to build new schools? It's called educational development charges, as a 5-bedroom new home on a greenfield. So even though we're doing urban infill and studio apartments that won't have children living in them, we're charged the same rate. So if you want to talk about other legislative pieces and policy pieces, we could do educational development charges, that we could phase them just like we do other development charges, that it's based on the size of the unit is how many new schools would need to be built. It would make sense to connect that to the size of the unit.
Thanks. Next question.
Yeah, thanks so much for the panel. My name is Justine, and as somebody who is going to be a future healthcare practitioner, I wonder what your thoughts are about equitable access to healthcare for people in precarious housing, and what people like me who will be in the healthcare field in the future should really look out for when caring for this population.
I think that might be a good question for Michelle.
So thank you, that's a very good question. I think what we see with individuals who are precariously housed, people who are experiencing homelessness, that often their healthcare needs in many cases go unmet because they prioritize other things. So if you find yourself unhoused, your priority really is to find where you're going to sleep tonight, what are you going to eat for dinner today. And so perhaps your healthcare needs are not the primary issue for you. I think we also hear from clients that there is still a lot of stigma around being homeless, about your living conditions. And so I think that we still have a ways to go probably with respect to treating those individuals as individuals, realizing they're part of the community as we all are, and so respecting them for the individual they are. For individuals who are homeless, for example, often they don't have a means to get to primary care. They don't have a means to get to the hospital necessarily, nor do they, it's not always a supportive environment. So I think really seeing the person for the individual, listening to what their needs are, and understanding that the challenges they're facing are impacting their health and well-being as well.
Thank you. Yes, next question.
You each touched on a number of really urgent things that need to be done that require political action. And often we come to meetings like this and people such as yourself say to us, well, contact your MPP. And we go away thinking, oh yes, I must do that. And then tomorrow's crisis comes and it doesn't get done.
Yeah.
But this is a real crisis. And I'm wondering if perhaps even a number of people who are here tonight who feel passionately about wanting to do something about this might form a working group to begin with our MPPs in Hamilton and then to spread out across the province. It's not that hard to do. And there is likely to be a provincial election next year. And I think you have to strike while the iron is hot. And I'm not trying to take political sides, but people like Bonnie Crombie are looking for something to hang their hats on. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about perhaps some people, as I say, who might even be here tonight, who would be willing to become involved in that, because otherwise it tends to get lost in the shuffle of our lives. Thank you.
I think that's a fantastic idea, to create a political action committee that could spread out to other faith organizations as well across the community. And that would be an incredibly powerful voice, not just during an election, but prior to help influence what some of the platforms might be in that election. So yeah, I'd certainly encourage folks here to get behind that idea. And sorry, what's your name?
Carol.
Carol. Yeah, talk to Carol about getting this set up.
That's the problem. You get volunteered when you have good ideas like that.
I really wouldn't mind working on it with other people. I think the danger is that the most well-intentioned things and things that are really important do get lost in the shuffle.
That's right.
So I think this is really important.
Thank you, Carol. So she'll be there. You're going to stay for after, I hope. A question from the chat. Is there any talk about cooperative housing as an option?
It's not in our space because inherently we're a charity. But I know that it has become a priority for the federal government, and they've allocated funds towards it. So there is a cooperative housing association. So if somebody's interested in how to do that, that's outside of my expertise.
There is a co-op group in Hamilton. We have a number of co-ops in Hamilton that have been existing, but we have a new co-op right now that it's a group of tenants that came together with efforts to purchase the building that they're currently living in order to maintain low rents. And they're still trying to get that initiative off the ground and bring themselves to success. But co-ops, not a bad option at all, and something where the tenants can come together and bring something to the table.
Thank you. Thanks for that question from the chat. Yes.
Hello, my name is Mohammed. I'm a community engagement coordinator with the Hamilton Community Benefits Network. And I had a question about the Hamilton LRT and opportunities for affordable housing that could result out of the Hamilton LRT. There's a lot of excitement behind it. There's a lot of fears behind it. It's kind of been on and off, and it's kind of been a mess. But I was wondering if you have any input on potential opportunities to save what's remaining of our affordable housing and also increase the stock potentially. Thank you.
LRT. And I mean, you just brought in another layer of something else, right?
Yeah. So I'll just, hey Mohammed, good to see you in person. We've had all our interactions on Zoom, but certainly getting involved in the Community Benefits Network is one critical step towards ensuring that is part of the conversation. So community benefits are really this idea around just that, ensuring that if there are big infrastructure projects happening in the community, let's ensure there's some public good that comes from that. And right now, what could be more good than ensuring affordable housing builds along that LRT route? And we know, depending on what side of the equation you're on when it comes to LRT, you know, we can't argue that there's been some displacement. Will the benefits of LRT on its own overcome that? I don't know, but let's ensure that affordable housing is part of the conversation, as well as, you know, ensuring that local people can get some of the jobs and skills upgrading that comes along with a massive infrastructure investment of this size.
You know, if we look at without going into a huge LRT debate, there's a lot of opportunity. If we look at the Kitchener-Waterloo LRT, you can see the incredible economic development that was driven by that. The unfortunate part of that story is almost no affordable housing units were built in all of that new economic development. So I think there's a lot of positives we can learn from the Waterloo Region LRT. It's being used more than they thought it was going to be, et cetera. But the lesson that we need to take away from is that if we just leave it up to the market and say, well, surely they will develop affordable housing as well. We're, you know, like I talked earlier about household incomes that the market is building for. We're over $100,000 away from our folks, that gap. Right, $15,000 household income is who we're housing, and the market is building units for people with $120,000 or above. So the gap there is not going to be filled by the market. So we have to keep asking that question. Keep asking, how can we use this for affordable housing? What's the target for affordable housing as a percentage of all new units along there? Let's at least be aspirational and throw out a vision. Yep. Even that's a good place to start.
Thank you. Next question.
I'm Reese. I'm an ED at a nonprofit in town, and I work closely with a lot of big home builders, and a big part of it is workforce development and skill development. How do we entice a lot of the home builders to look at it as their best business model to build those kind of houses that are going to be needed like that? Not only the bigger ones, but really ones that can be used by everybody. So.
Isn't that the question?
Yeah, right?
You know, I think that's what our governments have been trying to do for 20 years, and maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe we're asking them to do something that they inherently weren't designed to do. Maybe that's the challenge, because the enticements aren't enough. I'll use an example from another community where the community gave most of the affordable housing money to the private sector, hoping that they could do it cheaper, faster, better, these kind of things. Most of those units are, 20 years later, they're back to market rents because that was the 20-year agreement. Or they sold them off along the way, or they couldn't be enticed because it's not a space that they actually want to be in. To their credit, that's you know, that's not why their organizations or companies or corporations were set up to build affordable housing. So we're asking them to do something that inherently they weren't set up to do. And I'm not sure that we can entice them to do something they weren't set up to do.
But if profit is the only aspect of it, right, is it not profit down the road too? For basically, if people maintain those houses down the road, they're investing in the communities all along the way. They just don't have to be building the size of the houses. They can build various different models to accommodate, because they're still getting people to utilize and build communities and stuff. So
yeah, I love your ideas, and I hope you can spread it.
Yeah, agree. We agree. We just don't know how to how to get others. Yes. Next question.
Hi, my name's Garth Brown. I'm with Damasno Door Housing. We started about 3 years ago with a couple of very small projects, certainly in comparison to Indwell. But they made a difference. I'll reference that in a few seconds. I thank you all for your passions, your energy, your expertise, and your desire to either give us a carrot or a stick, I'm not sure which, to get us all involved. And I truly believe advocacy and reaching the two levels of government that aren't with us tonight is a very key step in doing that. I thank you, Jeff, for bringing up secondary suites. For the past decade, I've built several in Burlington primarily, but elsewhere. And the mandate was that that secondary suite would be a home for a family coming off of the wait list. And the synergy that was created has been dynamic and very successful for not only the homeowner or the investor, but also the residents, the tenants, the kids, the parents. And so in that note, I would ask Michelle to consider an alignment between the building department, zoning department, and housing. Because when someone comes in to apply for a secondary suite, the first thing that should be offered to them with the new incentives that are coming along is the opportunity to provide that unit for someone, one of the 6,000 plus households on the wait list. More often than not, being the market that it is in commodification, the homeowner is looking to maximize their profit, but with the new incentives that are being offered, there's an opportunity to not only strike a monetary balance, but a moral balance, and reach out to the hearts of those homeowners who can make a difference, a lasting difference in the lives of a family that they bring on board. There's been a touch about an organization to get involved, and through Michelle and Angela Burden and Grace Matters back in the summer, they approached a few of us to create a faith leaders group, and some of the participants are in the room here. We'd certainly welcome everyone and anyone to consider coming on board and joining our group. My email is garthbrown@simpatico.ca, so feel free to reach out. If I don't see you tonight, we'd love you to come on board. We've got over 90 people on the distribution list from all faiths, and we really see it as a growing opportunity to be a voice for those who have no voice. Last but not least, for the past 3 years, we've opened a couple of homes, one for men and one for women, a rooming house. We charge $500 a month, not the $800 or $900. And we provide support through Damascene Door. But the underlying value is companionship. I'm going to get update here. One of the guys who came in back in 2020 when we opened up refused to go into an apartment. He had been on the wait list. He was 64 at the time, had been a welder for years in various companies here in Hamilton. I'm getting personal here, Jeff, so forgive me. But Rick was given the opportunity to move into an apartment by himself. He said, no, I got my family right here. And he stayed. Tonight at 6:20, he passed away from cancer. So in Rick's honor, I want to thank you for what you're doing. And let's help all the Ricks who are out there, who have been on the streets and in the shelters and then found a family. Let's be their family and really make a difference in their lives. So thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Garth.
That's great.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just going to jump in quickly. Thank you, Garth. Thank you for sharing that. And yes, thank you for the work you've been doing to bring the faith-based leaders together. With respect to the accessory dwelling units, to your point about connecting the dots between the building department, us and housing and whatnot, we certainly have those roles set up now, so there is connection through the Secretariat. But I do want to say to you that if there are individuals who are looking to, I guess a couple of things. First of all, it doesn't necessarily need to be that you're building housing to take people off the wait list. Any housing that's built that allows people to move along that housing continuum, free up spaces, like that's really what we want to see. However, if you are in a place that you yourself are low income, or you want to house individuals in affordable units, there are some incentive programs already available that can support you financially with your building of an accessory dwelling unit on your property, provided that you are able to maintain that as an affordable rent. So there are some opportunities there. There are opportunities there financially, and to Jeff's point, there's opportunities to perhaps make a new friend, make a new neighbor, and help your community in the process.
Thank you, Michelle. I have a question for Jeff from the chat. How much money do we need the federal and provincial governments to provide to build 400 supportive units and 600 affordable units in 18 months through Hamilton? How much money do we need from the federal and provincial governments to build 400 supportive units and 600 affordable units?
400 supported.
600 affordable in 18 months. through Hamilton is home?
It's not Bill Gates asking, is
I
it?
don't know.
Yeah.
Whoever this is on the online, we're going to try and get you a number.
So Hamilton is Home has put out a postcard on that of what those numbers look like. I don't have those on me right now, but just Google Hamilton is Home, and you'll also find some of that. There are, it's a complex layering. We call it sometimes lasagna funding. You can find some money here, a development charge waiver, and maybe a reduced price on a piece of land, and you layer all these together. What are the available? The National Housing Strategy still is in place for deeply affordable units. There's available through the co-investment program up to $75,000 a door. So that's the primary source of income that's available, is $75,000, and new units are often in the range, depending on scale and a lot of different other pieces, but somewhere between 400 and up of cost per unit to build new units. So you can see that gap of the co-investment program offers up to $75,000, and then some low interest loans. So the more, if you're charging higher rents, you can carry more loans. But if you're trying to get those rents down to that $500 mark for people in ODSP, you really can't carry any financing. So you'd have to be able to close that whole gap between the $75,000 and, let's say, $400,000. So that's the challenge.
Thank you. Thank you. Any final questions in the audience here? I think that'll do it then. I just wanted I just want to thank you all again. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Michelle. This has been such a lively and excellent conversation. And remember, we can continue the conversation over coffee and yummies. And also at the back, there are 2 tables in the back. Remember, John Bell raising the roof. Look at the hand back there. Go get yourself an adorable toque. Show it off. And also Dr. Sally Palmer on the other side there. Go ahead and sign to raise the social assistance rates. Sign her petition. So thank you all so much for this conversation. And thank you everybody online for your questions, and everybody here. Wendy?
On behalf of the Cathedral, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Jeff and Tom and Michelle, and our Community Engagement Committee. Monica, you've done a wonderful job of moderating, hasn't she just? And please join us for our next Cathedral Chat, April 17th, on Christian nationalism. Please stay if you can and chat with one another. Meet some people perhaps that you have not met here before, and have some refreshments again from our wonderful Community Engagement Committee. And in memory of Rick, let us treasure the family in this room and in this community. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.